Hi everyone, in this week's episode we're going to be talking about some additional tyre changes and some tyre rule configuration due to insane track conditions in Qatar, health concerns from the heat, and obviously crowning a world champion. Let's get this started. So yes, hello everyone. We have plenty to get into. It was an action-packed weekend this weekend, with it being a sprint weekend. So I think the easiest place to start with all of this is probably going to be tyre rules and tyre changes and so on. So Chris, do you want to run us through what was changed this week?
Yeah, hi, I'm Chris. Stu's also here.
Yeah, hello.
Yeah, what a weird weekend. I don't think F1 sort of covered itself in glory, did it, this weekend?
I mean, ironically, it meant for a better race, in my opinion, but that's just me.
It did and it didn't. It was a different race.
I really didn't enjoy. I gotta disagree. I don't think it was a great race at all. I think it was nigh impossible to keep track of because the graphics are just not equipped for this style of racing. Like, you need to know who's pitted, who hasn't pitted, what's going on throughout the field, and because obviously because we all knew they were limited on laps, but no one quite knew exactly, unless you had like reams of data in front of you. The average person at home probably couldn't tell how many laps a particular person had done on a particular set of tyres at any particular time.
Let's take that bit of it out of the equation, though. Let's take the graphics out of the equation. Imagine we have graphics for it. The racing was better.
Yeah, the race
was better.
If Formula One was equipped for this kind of racing, then yes, I would agree with you. But I don't think that. Yeah. You do want to see, yeah, I agree with you that you do want to see drivers pushing from start to finish, and I think that is the one cool aspect of it that we got. But I think the way we got to that and the way it was presented on screen was an absolute complete and utter failure.
I think my problem with it as well was that the strategy of the race boiled down to, are they going to pit on lap 16, 17 or 18? Like, that was it. That was the end of the strategy because they were mandated to 18 laps per tyre set for reasons we'll get into. Yeah, I do agree that seeing proper flat-out racing was a kind of nice change, and it was more like an IndyCar or a WEC race. It was like flat-out sprints. And I will say, we have a go at Crofty a lot. I don't know if you guys watched on F1 TV or Sky, but I thought Crofty and Kroon Chandok did a very good job of presenting kind of what was going on in the race with very little information to go on.
Yeah, the F1 TV team, I would say, did the same. I mean, admittedly, there's three of them because they've got both David Coulthard and ex-Renault man.
Joe
Palmer, thank you. Yeah. They got both of them this weekend. So some weekends it's one or the other weekends like this it's both. So yeah, I think they did a pretty good job. Probably.
Yeah. So I guess to kind of get into what happened, essentially it all came from Pirelli finding signs of damage to the tyres after FP1, which of course was the only practice session of the weekend, which sort of compounded the issue, I suppose. They said they could see the beginning of the sidewall separating from both the surface, the actual compound, and the kind of carcass of the tyre, which obviously is really bad news bears.
Yeah, not good.
Especially on a weekend where we've basically found, it's not official yet, but we've basically found out Pirelli are getting a new contract for the next 3 or 4 seasons of F1.
Oh, really?
I feel like they were maybe going to announce that this weekend and sort of decided to back off on that announcement under the circumstances.
Fire on that one, yeah.
It felt a bit like Indianapolis. What was it? 2005 was it? The infamous race where all but 6 cars didn't take part in the race. I mean, at least F1/the FIA found solutions this time that still let a race go ahead.
Yeah. Well, they
I
had to
think-
because everyone was on the same tyre. So there wasn't going to be... I think that was going in their favour quite a lot. Like, if they didn't find a solution, then there's no race.
There's no race,
Whereas
yeah.
before in Indy 2005, like, you had you were in the middle of a tyre war and you had, you know, conflicting tyre companies wanting to show off their product and get one over on their competitor by saying, well, look, our tyres work. These guys' tyres don't work.
Yeah.
So none of that this time, just a set of tyres that didn't work and concessions had to be made and rules had to be changed on the fly as per usual, which is just not what you want to see in a sport of this level.
Yeah. Well, first of all, they changed the track. They made the track narrower at two corners by using paint to make the curves wider, which was just a bit dumb. And then they gave the drivers 10 minutes to sort of reacquaint with the corners. Now they are basically different corners with different entry speeds, and that was bizarre in itself. And then, we had this 18 laps per tyre limit imposed, which basically meant, every driver was doing quality laps for the whole race, which presents its own problem, which we'll get into. And it also basically mandated 3 stops per driver. And I mean,
So
we
a quick question, because I was kind of busy for a lot of the weekend and I didn't see a lot of this. So did they mandate that everyone had to make 3 stops, or was it just
No, it was mandated
just the
that
distance on the tyre?
no tyre could do more than 18 hot laps, is how they put it.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay.
So that meant that if you had a tyre that you'd use in practice or qualifying and put 10 laps on at some point, you could only do 8 on it. Which is where some of the strategy variants came in, because not everyone had 3 sets of brand new spanking tyres to go 18 laps on each time.
Yeah, which is why it was so confusing, because you didn't know how many laps someone was going to have on a set of tyres. Like whether... And as well, the other thing was like the soft tyre was good for like 3 laps.
So,
useless.
Question then. So I know, Stu, like one of your complaints about this whole thing was the graphics. At no point did you get the graphics informing you the latest that a particular car could pit.
They did it like
because I was
once
getting them,
or twice.
Watching them through F1 TV. I saw them, I feel like, quite a few times of Verstappen has to pit no later than 17. Russell has to pit by this lap. And
well, that's fine, but I mean, that's
whatever
no
was
good.
relevant at the time, essentially. I'm not saying it was enough, but we have to remember that this is a directive that they've put in for safety's reasons 4 hours before the race.
Well,
and I think that
which is
considering the situation, I think that it's a bit harsh saying that it was a complete mess, because they did what they could with them. Like they put something in place.
They did, but they should never have been there in the first place. That's why it's a complete
that's the
failure.
thing. They did their best in a situation that should never have arisen. Like
this is the pinnacle of motorsport. Like the tyres ought to be able to take the hammer that they get. They run these tyres week in, week out, and they've managed to develop a tyre that's no good in Qatar for reasons that no one understands. Well, no one outside of Formula 1 seems to understand.
I think it feels like a double-pronged problem. A, it's another problem with these Pirelli tyres, and B, it's a circuit that last time they were there, they had tyre failures. At the time, they said because of curb problems. There still seems to be curb problems there now. They've resurfaced it, and basically F1 is the first series that's run on a resurfaced track, so it's no wonder they were sliding all over the place in FP1. And it kind of is a perfect storm of just
neglect.
All the wrong... Yeah.
Like they've not bothered to do the due diligence before running.
It doesn't feel like it at all.
Circuit. That's what it feels like to me, which to me is a failure. Like,
I think the problem is held with the FIA.
Let me just say, I can
Pirelli,
forgive them for not having the graphics in place for something like this in mitigated circumstances. That's fine. What I'm saying about that is, like, if this was something that was going to be going forward was going to be a thing that was going to continue to happen. You're going to have a tyre that lasts and you're going to limit, the number of laps someone can do on a tyre, and you're going to have all these pit stops. Then you kind of need to know. I mean, they weren't even showing the graphic. This is one of those races where you really need to see the graphic showing you how many times a driver had pitted, and I think I saw that like twice the whole time down the timing tower. And you really need to see that a lot more. I would go as far as to say, for races like this, you need a little dot marker or something, or a little tire marker. Like, it could be just a coloured, a white, red, or yellow dot to say what tyre a driver has pitted onto and how many pit stops they've done. So they've got, they might have one red dot and one yellow dot to say they've pitted twice on each pit stop. The colour represents what tyre they've picked up. At least then you can keep track of who's pitted, and based on where they are in the timing tower, you understand that where they are in that point of the race. Because when you're trying to keep track of, this season 20 drivers, hopefully next season 22 drivers, or sometime soon 22 drivers, that's a whole other episode, I guess. You need to have this information at your fingertips in order to make sense of what you're seeing on screen, because there just wasn't enough data on screen for you to properly follow what was happening.
Yeah, it just it didn't feel like a normal F1 race, which at times can be good and can be fun and different. And I think the fact that there was some good racing helped, because I kind of feared it would be a procession in that everybody was going to be on exactly the same pit strategy. And it kind of killed any chance of undercuts. But, there was a decent race out of it. The other problem that kind of the tyre issue compounded was the fact that it was, 30, 35 degrees at night. Yeah. And all the drivers could barely physically do it. And
I have never seen that many drivers at the end of a race look that shattered.
Charles Leclerc said it's the hardest race we've ever had to do, and if any driver tells you any different, they're lying, basically.
It's interesting as well when you compare that to Singapore, because usually Singapore's got those kind of connections with it because it's hot there and it's very physical and it's obviously long as well. Like, Singapore's usually a long race because of how slow the circuit is in comparison to other circuits to get the distance done. So yeah, for the vast majority of the grid who have done multiple races in Singapore, both this year's layout and old one, to be saying this was more physically demanding is quite eye-opening, I would say, when you think about it like that.
I think a big part of the problem is that Singapore has a lot of slow corners and it's a race of tyre saving, whereas because of this tyre issue, they were, as we've said, basically doing quali laps for the whole race, and the circuit is mostly fast and medium corners. Yeah. And, loads of drivers were saying that their vision was just blurring towards the end of the race and they were near blacking out.
They got acute hypothermia. That's what they did.
Yeah, Lance Stroll said it's no wonder he had so many track limit violations, because going in some of the fast corners, he basically couldn't see where the track limits were because his vision was struggling. I mean, we had Sargent, who admittedly had said he would kind of had some flu-like symptoms before the race. He ended up retiring after 40 laps. Ocon threw up inside his helmet. We saw Albon having to be helped out of his car and going to the medical centre. I mean, they're the ones
walked up to an ambulance. Stroll literally walked up to an ambulance and asked them for help. And as soon as he got out of the car, he somehow got himself out of the car. It looked like such a struggle. Honestly, I've never seen anything like it. It looked really, really, really dangerous to me.
Yeah, it was very dangerous. I felt so sorry for Sargent. The guy was trying so hard to keep going, especially with the pressure he's under. And you've got to applaud Williams for the way they handled that kind of thing, because you could tell the guy really wanted to keep going, but it was just becoming dangerous.
Yeah, it's better. I think in any case, whoever it is, I think if you're feeling that way and your body is just telling you no, stop it, and you're in a car that's capable of the speeds through corners that these are, then it's probably safest course of action is to
absolutely
get yourself into the pits and get out of that car, because it could have ended. The thing is, right, they've dodged a bit of a bullet here because this could have gone so much worse. When Lance Stroll's saying he's blacking out during the high-speed corners, all it takes is for that, to go one corner too far and full blackout, and then suddenly you're doing 200 miles an hour in a Formula One car, steaming towards the barriers with nothing to stop, no foot on the brake. Like you're unconscious. And that is just a terrifying thought.
Yeah, it really is. Like, so something has to change. F1 can't go back to this track with this set of circumstances again. Like, they need to fix the curbs. They need to fix the track surface. They need to run the race either right at the start or right at the end of the season when the temperatures are lower.
Yeah, it's just too dangerous.
Yeah, like you want to see drivers, being pushed and going to their limits, but this was just too much. Nobody wants to see drivers struggling that much.
No.
Yeah, weird one. And then among all of it, personally, I would say the solution is not go to this track because I'm not a huge fan of it.
Maybe tyres that don't disintegrate. That could be a solution.
Yeah, that like the tyres need fixing. Have other series running on tracks before F1 gets there might be a good idea. I mean, F2 is scheduled to go there next year and they'd be racing during the day, which sounds like an abysmal idea.
Well, it gets more humid. It actually gets more humid towards the evening there, they were saying. So like in the daytime,
really?
It's actually not so bad because it's a
dry
drier heat. Whereas when it's that humid, you just can't escape the heat. Even if when you're going fast, it's still hot. Even when you get out of the car and you're not sort of in that hot box anymore of a Formula One car, 50 odd degrees in the cockpit, probably a lot more than that this weekend. You get out and you're still roasting. You just can't cool down, and that's why we saw the problems with them when they were getting out. Once they're out of the car, they're all lying down because they're just desperately trying to cool down.
Yeah,
I mean, I saw Alex Brundle pointed out that WEC and a lot of other race series actually have temperature sensors inside the helmets, and if they get over a certain temperature, they have to bring the cars in and do something about it. And if F1 wants to continue to, let's face it, have races in the desert, they're going to need to think of things like that to try and mitigate these things. Because
I guess like they've never really had to do it before because they're open cockpit cars. So you would think that there's a big area there for heat to escape. It's not as much of an oven as what maybe say a GT3 car or a prototype endurance car would be. But yeah, I think like given it's probably time to have some sort of, given the amount of monitoring they do on those cars and the drivers have heart monitors on them and all sorts, you'd think there'd be some sort of temperature monitoring going on as well, especially given how hot they are. I would not be surprised if next season, as a result, they did bring some sort of rule in like that. But I mean, it's the same for all the drivers. So if it happens to one of them, surely it's going to happen to all of them. They'd all have to come in. And then what? Then your race weekend, your race is over for every driver on the road because it's got too hot. But the world we're living in is a world where temperatures are rising, and you're going to see. Just look at how hot this summer's been in the UK. Well, this autumn is in the UK.
Yeah,
temperatures are rising. People got to be kept safe in their sports. So. Yeah,
I feel like
doing about it.
The majority of races this season have either been hot or wet, and not much in between.
Yeah. Well, let's not. I don't want to get too much into the climate changey stuff because people will just switch off. But
still, it's a reality that both F1 and Pirelli need to think about at both ends of that scale.
Yeah, atmospheric conditions are different to maybe what they were 10 years ago. Let's leave it at that.
And among all of that, once again, Max Verstappen has won a championship and we're talking about something else that's gone on. Like every time he wins a championship, it's not under normal circumstances, is it? I mean, we've talked about a bunch of other stuff, but he won a championship on a Saturday, of all things. Didn't win the race that he won the championship as well, which is really funny given the season he's had.
Yeah. Well, didn't win the championship in the race that Formula One would probably have liked him to win the championship in as well, which is hilarious.
But he did. In the process, he's also broken Vettel's record for most laps led in the season. He's as good as taking the record for the biggest winning margin. Vettel had that record as well, of 155 points, and Max is already 200 points ahead of Checo. So that's basically a done deal as well.
And there's a lot more than 200. There's way more than... There
must be five races left.
How many?
Five races left.
And there's a sprint or two.
At least one sprint, yeah.
And there's points for fastest laps as well. So.
That could be 300 by the end of the season, the way things are currently going.
Totally.
I mean, we've spent half the season talking about how good Max Verstappen is. I don't think there's any point labouring that other than to say what an unbelievable championship run this is.
Unbelievable drives, plural, leading up to this championship. Unbelievable car. So, hats off to Red Bull for making an absolute weapon of a car. Whatever your opinion is of Red Bull, I think it's pretty obvious they've absolutely just killed it with this car. It's such a good car.
Yep.
On that note, I highly recommend listening to the Beyond the Grid episode with Adrian Newey. Really interesting hearing him talk about, the process and where this car came from. After listening to this, obviously.
Yeah, don't leave yet.
Max kind of had to push a bit for this win, though. Like, it wasn't the dominance we've seen a lot of other tracks, and because McLaren continue to just kind of get quicker and quicker. Like, the season McLaren's had just continues to be baffling how much they've turned it around.
Oh man, they were like in Bahrain, they were nowhere. They looked like, I remember saying, like, in those first couple of races, if I was at McLaren, I'd be really, really worried right now. And my goodness, the way they've turned it around. I mean, that's basically easily the second fastest car now, and not that
for sure
far behind. Well, at times ahead of the Red Bull. It'll be interesting to see how they go in the next few races, but on this like perfectly flat surface, they were absolutely up there with Red Bull.
Yeah, I mean, Piastri won the sprint race, and there wasn't any weird circumstances around that. Like, Piastri qualified fastest and was just quickest. Obviously, Max had to make his way through traffic, but even when Max got into second, like, he was closing the gap, but not by much. Like, that gap wasn't... I know they were managing tyres a lot in the sprint race, but that gap wasn't coming down massively. I'm sure in the Grand Prix, Max had a lot of pace in the bag if he needed it, but even so, he said he had to kind of push more than he has at other races to make sure he was far enough ahead. Really, I mean, a flawless drive from Piastri in the sprint race. Like, obviously he lost the lead to Russell, but kind of kept his head, brought it back. The only thing I think missing from that drive, by Piastri's own admission, was the safety car restarts, which he admitted were all terrible. That's one thing he definitely needs to work on.
Went then again in the Grand Prix either, to be fair.
No, they didn't. But and then McLaren second and third in the Grand Prix as well, despite a pretty ropey qualifying session for the Grand Prix. Lando was pretty down, I thought, for a lot of the weekend. Every time you saw him being interviewed, he was being pretty hard on himself, especially after he kind of cocked up qualifying.
I think it's a case of knowing what the car was capable of, though. Like, they don't have their lap times deleted in Q3. They're fighting for pole and a worst case, like, on the front row with Max and on the second row behind him. Like, they're right there with him if those lap times aren't deleted. And I think, given where they finished in the race and just how utterly dominant they were over everybody else on the grid, they would have given Max a good run for his money had they been able to start higher up and do it from the get-go.
Especially if one of them could have jumped him off the line as well, which we've seen a few times this year. Like, the one thing that Red Bull can't do is start particularly well. So
Yeah.
It's the one chink in its armor, isn't it? It's where it starts. But I mean, I'd take that because it's so powerful in a straight line and so good on the DRS that you can kind of, if that's your one weakness, then you're more than equipped to make up for it in other areas, aren't you?
Yeah. A shame Mercedes kind of were out of the picture in the Grand Prix because, without getting too far ahead of ourselves, I think given what George showed in the Grand Prix, I think Mercedes McLaren could have been quite an interesting battle had all four of them been in there, but obviously we weren't to find out. But yeah, great day for McLaren, great weekend for McLaren. That brings them within 11 points of Aston Martin now. It's a kind of a given they're going to overhaul that now.
I mean,
they also... Go ahead.
No, I was just going to say they're not that far behind Ferrari. I'm not saying they will do it, but with 5 races left and the kind of circuits we're going to, I would not be surprised if it gets very tight between Ferrari and McLaren by the end of the season. That
whole top of the table's really closing up, isn't it?
Mm.
It's the way this season's ebbed and flowed, isn't it? That's the thing. Like there's been such performance swings among those top sort of 5 teams minus Red Bull. So, Ferrari, Mercedes, McLaren now, and Aston. And Aston have obviously tailed off somewhat, unless they get in gear. They are, I mean, it looks almost certain they're going to lose to McLaren. Yeah. Mercedes got one more big upgrade coming next race, which could, turn things around a little bit for them because they looked a little bit off the boil last few. Well, they did look off the boil previous couple of races. This race they actually looked really, 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 really promising. And McLaren just absolutely killing it at the moment. Really, really, really strong performances. So it's going to be interesting to see these. That's the thing that I think is going to keep us going in this last five races. Seeing how that other Formula 1.5 championship sort of plays out.
Yeah, 2nd to 5th in the constructors is all very much up for grabs, I think.
Yeah.
Also, I have to mention that McLaren set a new pit stop world record of 1.80 seconds, which beats what Red Bull did a few years ago by a couple of hundredths, which is all the more impressive when the wheels are that much bigger and heavier now. And they've still honed it to...
And not only that, but they've, since that Red Bull record, they've actually taken steps to slow pit stops down. They've taken some like the digital tools they were using to speed things up during pit stops and just made it much, much more manual. And when you take that into account, like what an achievement that pit stop is.
I don't think they had one slower than 2.2 during the whole race.
No, they were on fire.
Every time I saw a McLaren pit stop, it was about 2 seconds. Obviously, the one slightly quicker and the others were marginally over that. It was insane. Just consistency more than anything.
Yeah.
I think it points towards McLaren right now are looking like the team that over the next sort of the course of the next season, maybe, and certainly for the rest of this season, they're the team that are most able to emulate the dominance that that Red Bull have shown over this season. I don't think they're going to be sort of. I'd like to see them catch them up by the end of the season and win a race on merit. I think they've already done it with Piastri, so maybe I've already seen what I wanted to see. I don't know, but I'd like to see them win a Grand Prix on merit before the end of the season. I think it's possible. I think when you look at Sao Paulo last season was the one that they weren't necessarily great at. So
I mean, when you look at the list, the only one that I've got let's say less confidence for them at is probably Vegas, and that's just because of the kind of circuit that it is, and it's a bit of an unknown anyway. In the fact that we've never been there, but I think that'll be a place that's hard to keep up with Max, just purely because of the straight line speed. But the rest, I think that they can seriously contend.
Yeah, well, it could be that Red Bull have problems at Vegas if it's as bumpy as what Singapore is.
True,
and I don't think Vegas is known for its sort of ribbon flat roads, is it? Chris,
not
you know a
at
bit
all.
more about Vegas than I do. So.
That applies to basically all of America. Unless you're in a national park, the road surfaces are abysmal in most places.
So the bits that are being used, I've literally seen them completely rip the whole thing up and put it back down. Whether that means that it will be palatable for an F1 car, let's say, is another matter. But I've literally seen footage of them ripping the whole thing up and putting it back down the strip. So
still, like, even if they've done that, those roads do get a lot of hammer. So
Yeah.
it could be even with that having happened, it could still be that they don't stay flat for very long, especially the amount of traffic going through them. So we'll see.
It's going to be cold there as well. Like a night race in Vegas, it's going to be pretty chilly. Like tire temperatures are going to be an interesting factor there as well.
But
Anyway, we're getting way ahead of ourselves now.
Yeah.
So a quick chat about Sergio Perez. Out in Q2 again in race qualifying, only made 8th in sprint qualifying. He was a DNF in the sprint. I think we can agree that was not really any part of his fault. I think that was
just unlucky. Wrong
racing instant, wasn't it?
Yeah.
And then he managed 10th place in the Grand Prix after starting from the pit lane. And that was only because Stroll got a penalty. He picked up 15 seconds worth of track limit penalties during the race.
Yeah. Now, normally, I would be laying into him hard for this. But I think given the conditions were so difficult there for them, I think I'm amazed there weren't more drivers. I'm amazed there weren't more penalties.
There was a number that got into 10 seconds plus, wasn't there? There was at least 3 of them that managed 10 seconds plus in penalties.
I think so, yeah. It was 50. There were 51 track limit violations total during the race.
Compared to 83, I think, in Austria.
Jeez.
Yeah.
But yeah, you're right. I think it would be harsh to lay into him too much on that particular thing. But it does feel like the public support of him is waning a bit, and having been convinced he was still going to be in that car next year, no problem, I'm getting less and less convinced race on race now.
I think
he seems
Ricciardo
pretty
is
lost.
a shoe-in at Red Bull, and they'll keep Lawson in the Alfa Tauri. I'm almost certain that if they don't do it this season, they'll do it for the start of next season.
It comes back to when we talked about it last time. Like if Hamilton gets past him, he's a goner. I don't think that like the car that he's in and the performance it's capable of, and where Mercedes have been up and down this season and never really found like true consistent form. If Hamilton finishes ahead of him, Perez is gone. I'll say it now, but I think that his only saving grace to be in that seat next year is to hold on to that second place. But the form he's in, I don't see it. Like the last time he was anywhere near the podium was Monza, and then since then he's barely scored points.
And
Ricciardo breaking his hand could end up being the worst thing that's ever happened to Sergio Perez.
Yeah, some of the rhetoric coming out of Red Bull this weekend as well. Christian Horner's saying that they need to go back to basics. They need to do a reset. All this stuff, all the kinds of things that you don't want to hear when you're a driver in the top team. So yeah, that some of the sounds coming from that team now are slowly beginning to sound a lot like he's going to get the boot sooner.
Is basics what Christian Horner calls AlphaTauri?
Back to basics.
Hamilton sort of did Perez a bit of a favour by crashing himself out of the Grand Prix, because otherwise that gap between second and third could have come down massively.
It'd be single digits, wouldn't it, if he'd have finished up there, second place, I think.
Quite possibly,
very close to, at least. Anyway, he'd have broke the 200 mark, which
he'd been getting that for sure.
220 something. So
yeah.
It's going to be an interesting battle, I think, going into the end of the season, wouldn't you say?
Yeah, there's plenty still to be looking for the rest of the season, which is nice at least.
The irony is it's not a direct battle on track, I think. Like,
no.
The battle for Hamilton is just with whoever he's around at the time, like his teammate and the McLarens. And for Perez, the battle is to somehow stay in the points by the end of a race. Like,
and it is
Find some
literally
form.
like
It's
staying
weird.
in the points as well.
Yeah.
It's not like he's just a bit slow and he's not very close to. He's not as close in second as he should be. He is literally fighting to be in the top 10 every race at the moment.
I think like, yes, obviously there were mitigating circumstances to some degree with the conditions and people were struggling, but I think you just have to look at how easily Max got through the field when after his stops, when he was kind of, because it basically overtakes that technically were for position, but people were a bit out of kilter in terms of
Out of sync.
out of sync. So like there were people that hadn't stopped yet, but when you compare the way that Max just carved through people to the way that I feel like Sergio got stuck behind, it was either Bottas or Joe. It was one of the Alfa Romeos, and it felt like he was behind him for like 4 or 5 laps. Yeah. It's like that wasn't just they're on fresher tyres, vice versa. Like that was just he didn't have the pace to beat an Alfa Romeo.
I actually think in this instance, a better comparison is Russell, because Russell obviously was sent to the back, immediately start of the race, sent to the back of the grid more or less. And Russell was just doing such a better job of getting through the field than what Perez was. And whether that's to do with, Russell having a better car for those conditions comparatively to whatever Perez has got, I don't know. But Russell was clearly a much faster driver than Perez in the Red Bull.
Yeah.
Throughout the entire race, and that's not a superior car to the Red Bull across the season. The Red Bull is a much much faster car.
Yeah.
So it's strange, isn't it? I wonder what is going wrong. Is it setup? Is it just the parts are not coming to that car? Maybe they're trying to save money and just giving one car all the parts. I don't know.
I think with the dominance that they'd already had, though, there's no need.
Yeah.
Though. Like yes, obviously the championship's only officially been finished this weekend, but how long has he been far enough in front of
finished.
someone from another team? Like, there's no reason to like, got to push this to Max first, got to push this. There's just no need for it. No. If anything, it should have been, we've got to push this to Sergio first to keep him away from the rest and get a 1-2. Like, if anything, it should be the other way around.
I'm sure there's something in Max's contract that gets him all the bits.
I know, but like, when you think about it from a team level, if there's any kind of favoritism for where the parts are going, in theory, that's where you'd go as a team boss, provided the driver's contract doesn't restrict that.
Well, if second place in the championship is as important to them as what Christian Horner says it is, then you'd think that they'd just throw everything behind Sergio Perez now, surely, to get him where he needs to be. Yeah. But obviously, I mean, we know from last year that Verstappen isn't going to help Perez get anywhere, is he? He's not going to, when you look at Sao Paulo last year, where there was a simple opportunity for him to just let Perez through and make second place less dicey for him, and he just didn't.
There was that whole
even though the team told him to.
Yeah, the whole debacle of he didn't do it for me. There was all that, wasn't it?
Yeah, it was the
Monaco
thing, wasn't
qualifying
it?
thing.
That was it. Yeah,
whatever that was. Where well, let's not get into that.
Yeah, let's not. Should we move on to Mercedes?
Yes.
Yeah. As I said, they came together turn one. Initially blamed each other, but Hamilton's held his hands up since and said, "Yeah, that was on me," which it was.
Yeah, weird bit of social media of them hugging.
Yeah, that didn't seem forced in the slightest, did it?
No, it didn't, did it?
It was a pretty silly mistake from a driver of Hamilton's caliber, really. Like, it's not like it was another 3 wide thing, but like, whereas the Ocon, Hulkenberg, Perez thing, like, you could legitimately give Ocon the excuse of not knowing he was 3 wide. Whereas this is turn one, Hamilton has just seen where the 2 drivers in front of him have gone. Like, it was never going to work.
He dove round the outside of him. Like, he was only just alongside of him at the point he decided to just send it in. Like, why he thought he could turn in that far, I have no idea. But that's a combination of how much speed he'd carried in. Like, he needed to start making a turn in. Like, I I don't know what he was thinking, but
I think he just put his car in the wrong place. I think he had so much grip that he just probably used he didn't have to turn in that. He didn't have to cut in that close to try and chop them. There was absolutely no need for it. I think there was probably an element of pushing too hard, red mist almost kind of thing, because he'd been on the radio moments before the start of the race, saying, "I'm a sitting duck here on these tyres."
Yeah.
There was only a couple of them on the soft tyres, and he would have been in within like 5 laps, I think, for another set, for a set of mediums. But yeah, it is a uncharacteristic mistake that he's made. He's basically done a Vettel and just expected the cars on the inside that he's gone by to disappear behind, to go behind him. And that's not how physics works.
They simply don't
in the real world. So he lost a wheel, didn't he, as well in the process? And lost a tyre and half a wheel in the process.
He also got himself a €25 fine and a reprimand for crossing the live racetrack to get back to the pit lane afterwards, which was another pretty silly lapse of judgment on his part.
Pretty ain't care. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, it doesn't mean a whole lot to him, but
he probably got paid more than 25k to take half of turn 1, so I'm sure that doesn't bother him.
That's a good point.
He probably got paid more to get that far around the circuit.
George Russell, he had a bit of a cameo in the lead of the sprint race until his soft tyres said nope and he ended up dropping back. And then, in the Grand Prix, dropped all the way to the back after that turn 1 thing, but really good comeback drive from him to finish 4th. I've got a theory about George Russell. George Russell's absolute peak performance in a Formula One car only appears when he's had some kind of setback. You think about his first race for Mercedes his very first Mercedes race in Bahrain, and he had all those setbacks, and then he came back and was just driving like an absolute demon and still nearly won the race a second time. And he was the same this time. It's to the back am I? I'll show you all. And he just drove like an absolute monster for it.
You can say the same for quite a few of them. Hamilton's had some amazing drives after picking up penalties or having to have a gear, those kind of things that send him to
Brazil a couple of years ago.
Yeah, Verstappen's done similar things in the past. Even Vettel has, to a degree, where he had to race from the back to win a world championship. There is something about I'm back here, I've got to get my head down and do it, that just, I don't know, it switches to that.
I'll show you.
Yeah, and I think that shows you that caliber. You see, that's the difference in the caliber between the good drivers and the potential great drivers, is they're the kind of people that can take that kind of adversity, start at the back, and somehow end up where they do, podiums and even wins on odd occasions. And then you get Perez, who barely gets to 10th in comparison.
Yeah. It's a very good point. Good
point. Let's talk about Lance Stroll. So he failed to get off Q1 again. It's 4 races in a row now. And he sort of had what you can only really describe as a bit of a tantrum. He threw his wheel away, and then he was seen shoving one of his trainers out of the way when they were trying to get him to go to the interviews and stuff. Then he did his interview and he was giving 1 or 2 word answers to stuff. And these are high-performing athletes. They're running on adrenaline. Yeah, they're going to get upset when things don't go well for them. But the guy looks a bit broken to me. He's really not in a good place.
I think one of the big differences, you see people get in these kind of moods, these just really down places. Generally speaking, though, I would say for the most part, whatever's happened is out of their control. For the most part, it's that somebody's hit them and taken them out. Something's gone wrong with the car. So Alonso, when he's gone through the car was underperforming. Hamilton's gone through phases where the car's failed on him occasionally, and he's had similar sort of reactions. I don't know, going all the way back to Schumacher. The time Schumacher nearly lost his proverbial with Coulthard, it was because Coulthard was invisible to him, and he drove into these like weird circumstances. This is like it's all in Stroll's own hands for his performance. The car is clearly capable of far better, and there's no one that can get better out of it, like and improve that situation other than himself. So to be taking it out on those around him, I don't see like how he has the right essentially to not even like obviously what he did over the weekend was not acceptable, but even to just be like in general be taking it out on the team, like sort of verbally and with the attitude and stuff, like it's in his hands. Alonso's showing that the car is, yeah, fair enough, it's not where it was at the start of the season, but it's still more than capable of finishing solidly in the points and picking up points. So what is Stroll doing in it? Like, what is he doing?
It's hard not to feel like he's reached a point where he's kind of, he can see like the peak of his F1 career. Like he can't get close to Alonso. He's struggling to get out of Q1 even. Like I don't know if he sees where he even goes from here. And he can't help that all the media recently, if it's not been talking about Logan Sargent's seat, it's been talking about his seat. Yeah, the guy's in a bad place.
It's a tricky spot to be in, isn't it?
Something's got to give. And you just have to wonder how long the team and his dad are going to persist with, I suppose.
Well, I think if you're getting out of the car, pushing people around, then probably not very long, even if your dad is the owner of the team. I think that's the answer to that one.
Well, that's the thing, isn't it? Like any other team, that just wouldn't fly in the slightest. And, you know, that feels, if you want to see an example of nepotism, like for him to be able to do that and kind of, you know, he has said that they're best buddies and everything's fine, but it's, I don't think the aggressor gets to say that everything's fine after the event. Anyway.
Not cool.
Last couple of little bits to mention. Got to mention Alfa Romeo, who've kind of finally managed to actually put a normal race together since they got their upgrades, and it went quite well for them. Bottas got through to the top 10 in qualifying and finished 8th. Zhou had a great race. He went from 19th to 9th for a double points finish for them. So happy days there.
Yeah.
And then Williams scored their first sprint points. Didn't get any points in the race, though Albon kind of faded as it went on. Although Albon did become the first Williams driver to lead a race in 8 years, which is a nice little stat. But yeah, that's kind of, I think, enough to talk about for now from that very strange race, other than to do a handful of awards.
Yeah, let's look at driver of the day first. I think there's quite a few nominations for this. So, I mean, the obvious one, I think, for most people is going to be Piastri. He won the official vote. Russell, as we've already talked about, coming from all the way at the back after the collision and having to pit earlier than most. That was, I think he was third. Was he the second or third, wasn't it? It was him, Piastri and Norris in the official top 3. I can't remember which way around Norris and Russell were, to be fair. A lot of people in chat really want Guan Yu Zhou to be mentioned because of the driver that we've literally just spoke about, again, coming from the back to finishing the points. And then kind of on the cusp of it all, we've got Norris as well with again, a solid drive. Like, what was his starting position? 6th, I think. And
my vote goes to Norris. I think Norris is my favourite. He was faster than his teammate by the end of the race, having worked his way through up to 3rd position and should have been 2nd, really. So yeah, I'm going to go Norris.
Chris?
Is it lame of me just to suggest giving driver of the day to all of them for even getting through that race?
I mean, if you want.
If you're going to force me to pick one, I think I'm going to go for Russell.
Okay, that's a good one.
And then this just makes it... Else. Well, I was going to go with Piastri because I think to do what he did in his rookie season and compete like he did is a sign of something brilliant to come. So I think tying for the 3 that were in the running for the top 3 officially is probably about right.
Yeah, it makes sense.
Yeah. Let's talk about moves of the day. There are a fair few, like I said, up at the top of the show. I think we've got a decent race. There's more moves than I'd have expected to see here. So we've got Russell taking the lead for the sprint. We've also got basically every move he put up the inside of everyone into turn 3, like just as a collective. That was probably going to be my suggestion personally. And we've got Hülkenberg around the outside of Tsunoda in turn 1. There was a similar thing from Norris going around the outside of, it must have been Leclerc, 'cause it was one of the Ferraris and the other one didn't start. So yeah, quite a few mentions for that. Anything you want to add to that, Chris, or any one of those in particular you want to single out?
I think Russell's move on Piastri in the sprint to take the lead was probably my favourite. That was a proper like out of nowhere dive bomb kind of move. I really like that one.
I
think Russell into turn 3 on everyone.
Yeah, it's like I said a minute ago. That was kind of going to be my suggestion for this. So it's getting a double vote. It is going to be the winner on this one.
Either way, it's Russell.
It is a double. Yeah, it's going to be Russell either way. And then the last award.
Honestly, what the are we doing here?
Sport for choice.
What the are we doing here?
We'll have 2.
There's so many options. We had 2 jingles.
Don't even know what happened then. Right, yeah.
I mean, there's so many.
So many to go through.
Let's rattle through these quick as we can.
I mean, all right, the list we've somehow narrowed it down to is a track that has no grip but yet also destroys tyres, changing the rules within 4 hours of the race starting, champagne having no fizz. I mean, it was rose water, but still. 51 track limit violations during the whole race, and the sheer number of penalties that came from it. Piastri having a lap deleted whilst he was being interviewed after qualifying. And then just TV director missing everything because there was so much going on. And then, Alonso's rejoin, just the way he kept his foot in after running wide through the gravel and basically nearly T-boned into the side of, I think it was Gasly. It was one of the Alpines, wasn't it?
I don't think it was gravel. I think it was just so dusty off circuit.
Yeah, it was.
It looks like they're going through gravel, but it's all tarmac. Yeah, it's all just...
Because that was what's funny about it. He was on like a kind of escape road, but he sort of got back on the escape road tarmac and then
punched it,
took the corner back onto the circuit like it was a normal corner and took a racing line on a bit of track that wasn't raced on. I think Piastri finding out he'd had his lap deleted while he was being interviewed was very funny. I think I'm going to pick that one.
I mean, considering as well that moments before that, the entire broadcast team were confused about why they were talking to Oscar and not Lando. They were expecting to be talking to Lando, who just had his lap deleted. And the question was, okay, Oscar, I'm not sure why I'm talking to you instead of Lando, but let's go with that. And he was like, I think he's had his lap deleted. He's gone. And I was, I tell you, but you've just had your lap deleted. Bye. Like, that was pretty WTF that it took so long. But then a 10-car field at that point, bear in mind, one of which had decided not to run because he was so clearly on pole. 10 cars, so 9 technically. And it took them that long to decide those 2 had made a violation. So it's somehow crept up there. That now you brought all those memories back to me from Friday night.
TV director missing everything. It gets one of my votes, but my main vote is I think I prefer the comp. Given this weekend was just so sketch in so many ways, I think I want to give it to a comedy one. So I'm like, no fizz in the champagne. It's not champagne, it's rose water, but
Lando desperately trying to make it go.
And you could see the kind of jokes they were making on the stage as well as they were doing it, which tickled me somewhat. So I think I'm going to go for that one.
Yeah, that one was very good.
There you go. Then, if Chris is saying that too, that's a winner. Right, I'm going to very quickly rattle through some mentions for our predictions because we've got 3 people who managed almost to get a 5 out of 5. They got 4.5. They were unlucky in the sense that they had Sargent as first DNF, and nobody else had Hamilton, so they got half a point there. To be fair, there was quite a lot of people who did that. These were just the only 3 people that got the other 4 things right at the same time. So you got Andrew Harrop, Dan Muttone, and Chris Matthews all got 4.5 points. So congrats to you guys. And then in terms of the championship overall, we've got Effortlessly at the top on 38.5, and Dagan Dushami on 36.5 in second, and James Hunt in third on 36. Quick shout out to Cardiff 04, who got 1,020 points to lead Grid Rival this week, and Effortlessly sits at the top of that championship as well 17,108. And then in the official F1 fantasy, we've got Pewis Hamilton, 44, and another Rick in the Wall, who both scored an identical 443 points. And the Ricky Bobby Racing School is leading the way there with 5,061 points. It's a good job I can get through those names, isn't it? Good. It's a good job I can get through them. Right, inbox, fellas.
Okay, let's do it.
Keep it saying now. Stay out. Box. Hey, man.
I'll take the first one. This was from Jay Alexander. It says, with Ocon, Hülkenberg and Perez getting into a fustercluck in the sprint race and Hamilton and Russell coming together, do you think that F1 needs to consider adopting the spotter system from Indy and NASCAR or something similar to help prevent such incidents? I think turn one is turn one. It's just...
turn one's going to happen.
And as well at NASCAR and in IndyCar, that usually they have the spotters mainly at oval circuits. I don't think they have them at regular circuits, right?
Yeah, they still
they do,
but it's not as much of a thing. And in an incident like the Ocon Hülkenberg Perez thing, I don't know if a spotter would be able to tell Ocon what was going on fast enough. For that to really make a difference, anyway.
I think it's the same in the Hamilton one as well. I think it all happened. That all happened so fast, especially in these cars.
Completely.
These races are much more. They're almost more dynamic. A lot more can happen a lot faster. I think in these races, as silly as that sounds, because even in the IndyCar, I think a lot of the time, even if you do have a spotter in IndyCar, you still see loads of crashes. You still see loads of crashes in NASCAR as well, even with the spotters. So I'm not sure how much difference they make.
Yeah, agreed. Next from Charlotte Taylor. Why did Mercedes start Lewis on the softs? To me, there was no benefit to that. He was never going to beat Max. As soon as we knew Lewis on the softs, I knew the Mercedes would collide in the first corner.
Wow.
She should have told
Mercedes
that. Do you want the shortest, simplest answer to that?
Yes.
Yeah. He was pretty much the only person on the grid that didn't have tyres to make the strategy work. It was limitation of what he had left and how many laps they could do, basically.
Oh, wow.
That's
rubbish, isn't it?
So
one of the problems with changing the rules halfway through, well, not even halfway through the weekend, right before the last part of the weekend, is people haven't prepared their tyres for it.
Yeah. That was the short version anyway. Baller Duck says, hey man, if Liam Lawson performs great in the next few races, do you think he could replace Danny Rick full time? Personally, I'd much rather have Liam Lawson in the car over Danny Rick. I can't see why Red Bull would keep Danny Rick besides for merchandise or fan publicity. Liam is the future. Danny is the past.
Wow. Oh, whoa. Hot take from
Hot takes. I mean, I think Liam Lawson is likely to replace Danny Rick only in as much as Danny Rick won't be at that team anymore for reasons that Stu brought up earlier in the podcast.
Yeah, I think so.
It's starting to look like the rest of this season is going to be Tsunoda and Ricciardo fighting over who gets the Red Bull seat, I think is the way things are starting to look. It's starting to look very good for Liam Lawson being on the grid next year.
Yeah.
Let's put it that way.
I would say so.
That's the most polite way of putting it.
Yeah.
The next one is from Peter Willington. He says, why was the stint 18 laps for all compounds of... I wondered this as well. Why was the stint limit 18 laps for all compounds of tyre? Surely it defeats the point of safety to let them use a soft for 18 laps if that was the limit for the hard, or alternatively the hard could have gone much longer, right? Yeah,
So the short version is that the problem they were having with the tyres wasn't to do with compound wear, it was to do with the physical construction of the tyre. So the compound didn't really make a difference. It was to do with the sidewalls and the corners being affected.
It can only take so many hits of curb. Is that more what it was? Which to explain why they
that was
made
more
the
like it,
yeah.
You could have the hardest compound in the world and you'd probably still have the same problem because it's to do with just the way the tyres are put together.
Yeah, so it's not necessarily the rubber, it's the canvas underneath that can't keep taking the repeated impacts because they're all going to have the same canvas. Yeah. Cool.
A couple of related questions here. First one from Lance Stroll, back of the Grid Burner account. Considering Aston Martin has now entered World Endurance Championship, can we expect them to have the same success as Ferrari? And would any soon-to-be former F1 drivers be interested in that seat? And related, Darth Kilowog says, I'd love an explanation of how Adrian Newey developed an endurance car for Aston Martin while he's with Red Bull. Can you simply rent Adrian Newey to make you a non-F1 car? Aston...
I was just going to say, that started whilst Aston were a sponsor of Red Bull, though, didn't it? That project.
It did, yeah. This is the Aston Martin Valkyrie, which is going to be entering the hypercar class. But yeah, that was developed in conjunction with Red Bull when they were the sponsor. So that's why. Will they have the same success as Ferrari? I don't see why not. Aston Martin have got a pretty long history of endurance cars in GT class.
They've won at Le Mans in GT class.
Yeah. And if Adrian Newey's helped them develop a hypercar, I don't see any reason why it won't be a very good one.
Yeah.
By the former F1 drivers thing, I assume that's alluding to maybe a way to sidestep Lance out of Formula One. I can see that happening.
I can see that happening.
He's only
one third
of the
soft
problem in the
landing
Le Mans
for him.
team as well.
Just don't put him in for the first stint.
Or the last one. Or any of the ones in the middle.
Or the middle one if you can avoid it.
Oh my God. Well, that descended into very quickly, didn't it?
Sorry, Lance. Just realised that's your burner account, yeah. I'll do the last one and move on. Michelle says, how worried does Lando need to be of Oscar passing him as the team number one?
Well, he was quicker, so I don't think he needs to be too worried. I think he just needs to get a little bit better in qualifying and just get over his little hump of sort of performances in quali, and then I think they're very, very, very evenly matched, those two. But if I was Lando, I wouldn't be too worried just yet.
I would say that the main thing he probably needs to do is stop being quite so hard on himself on weekends like what we've just had, because he proved on the circuit that there can be slight mistakes in qualifying, but he's got the goods to recover from that. And I'm going to correct myself, because earlier I said he started 6th, but he started 10th, didn't he? It was Piastri in 6th.
Yes, because he had both his laps deleted.
Yeah, so he was 10th overall on the grid. So, he's proven that he can fight through that field with a decent caliber car and get results. So, yeah.
But he is feeling the pressure, though.
Yeah, 100% he's feeling something, but I think that he just needs to not be too hard on himself, because it got very sort of self-negative very quickly. Nothing wrong with reevaluating the situation and sort of telling yourself, I need to be better. Running 2 laps out of bounds and getting them deleted is not good for consistency. But to be saying all this, I'm that. I can't say the words because we try and stay bleep free, but the things he was saying about himself, it's just, I want him to stay okay, because that's how you can sort of end up in a Lance Stroll spiral where you just never recover. So yeah,
he definitely still. As you said, he definitely still has an amount of race pace over Piastri at the moment. I think the fact that McLaren keep asking them not to race each other, if Lando's going to keep qualifying behind Oscar, that is maybe going to bubble over at some point. I think the best thing for McLaren is going to be if Lando gets his qualifying together and they are just on the track the way around they need to be in terms of race pace.
The best bit
they can always
that,
manage it with pit stop. They can manage it with pit stops and things.
True, but you still end up upsetting a driver by doing that.
In a race not like this one, you can manage it with pit stops. But yeah, my favourite part of all that was, well, I'm faster than him at the minute. Maybe we've got a gap to maintain here. Maybe you should let me through and just, see if I can get away. And they were like, yeah, but George is due to pit. We think he's going to put the softs on. He's probably going to be a threat, so we need to be mindful of that. And Lando's response was literally, yeah, exactly. So why let me be stuck here? Let me get away from him. I mean, luckily it never came to anything, but
it was the point I'm trying to make.
Yeah.
Another thing to say to Lando's credit as well is his fitness is on another level. Of all the drivers that looked really, really rough at the end of that race,
Yeah.
He looked the least rough of all of them. He looked like he was absolutely. He could look.
He
could
did
have done
actually.
another 10 laps.
Yeah.
I doubt he could have done another 10 laps, but he said he looked like he could have done. So
Yeah.
Credit to Lando for that.
Yeah.
And that wraps up this week. So, thank you to everyone who's joined us. If you've joined us here on YouTube, please do remember to like, share, and subscribe. If you want to get involved with our Discord and join the recordings live, head to patreon.com/back of the grid, where there's info on how to join us there. And then if you want to just contact us in general, you can do so by finding us on Twitter, X, Facebook, and Instagram. And then, of course, head to the website at backofthegrid.com, where there's a contact us form, and you can also register for all the predictions leagues and the fantasy leagues on there as well. So do that too. That is everything from us. So we'll be back next time around to look ahead to the stint in the Americas. And we'll see you then. Goodbye, everyone.
Bye.
Bye.